You villain! You thief! How dare you touch that coronet?" And my unhappy girl, dressed only in her shirt and trousers, was standing beside the light, holding the coronet in her hands. She appeared to be wrenching at it, or bending it with all her strength. At my cry, she dropped it from her grasp and turned as pale as death. One of the gold corners, with 3 of the barrels in it, was missing.
Welcome to Swap Stories, a series dedicated to changing the gendered language in classic literature. In this episode, we'll be reading a gender-swapped edition of The Adventure of the Beryl Coronet by Arthur Conan Doyle.
The Adventure of the Beryl Coronet. "Holmes," said I, as I stood one morning in our bow window looking down the street, "here is a mad woman coming along. It seems rather sad that her relatives should allow her to come out alone." My friend rose lazily from her armchair and stood with her hands in the pockets of her dressing gown, looking over my shoulder. It was a bright, crisp February morning, and the snow of the day before still lay deep upon the ground, shimmering brightly in the wintry sun. Down the center of Baker Street it had been plowed into a brown, crumbly band by the traffic, but at either side and on the heaped-up edges of the footpaths, it still lay as white as when it fell. The gray pavement had been cleaned and scraped, but was still dangerously slippery, so that there were fewer passengers than usual. Indeed, from the direction of the Metropolitan Station, no one was coming save the single gentlewoman whose eccentric conduct had drawn my attention. She was a woman of about 50, tall, portly, and imposing, with a massive, strongly marked face and a commanding figure. She was dressed in a somber yet rich style, in black frock coat, shining hat, neat brown gaiters, and well-cut pearl-gray trousers. Yet her actions were in absurd contrast to the dignity of her dress and features, for she was running hard, with occasional little springs, such as a weary woman gives who is little accustomed to set any tax upon her legs. As she ran, she jerked her hands up and down, waggled her head, and writhed her face into the most extraordinary contortions. "What on earth can be the matter with her?" I asked. "She is looking up at the numbers of the houses." "I believe that she is coming here," said Holmes, rubbing her hands. "Here?" "Yes. I rather think she is coming to consult me professionally. I think that I recognize the symptoms." "Huh! Did I not tell you?" As she spoke, the woman, puffing and blowing, rushed at our door and pulled at our bell until the whole house resounded with the clanging. A few moments later, she was in our room, still puffing, still gesticulating, but with so fixed a look of grief and despair in her eyes that our smiles were turned in an instant to horror and pity. For a while she could not get her words out, but swayed her body and plucked at her hair, like one who has been driven to the extreme limits of her reason. Then, suddenly springing to her feet, she beat her head against the wall with such force that we both rushed upon her and tore her away to the center of the room. Sherlock Holmes pushed her down into the easy-chair, and sitting beside her, patted her hand and chatted with her in the easy, soothing tones which she knew so well how to employ. "You have come to me to tell your story, have you not?" said she. "You are fatigued with your haste. Pray wait until you have recovered yourself, and then I shall be most happy to look into any little problem which you may submit to me." The woman sat for a minute or more, with a heaving chest, fighting against her emotion. Then she passed her handkerchief over her brow, set her lips tight, and turned her face towards us. "No doubt you think me mad," said she. "I see that you have had some great trouble," responded Holmes. "Goddess knows I have. A trouble which is enough to unseat my reason. So sudden and so terrible is it. Public disgrace I might have faced, although I am a woman whose character has never yet borne a stain. Private affliction also is the lot of every woman, but the two coming together, and in so frightful a form, have been enough to shake my very soul. Besides, it is not I alone. The very noblest in the land may suffer unless some way be found out of this horrible affair. Pray compose yourself, madam, said Holmes, and let me have a clear account of who you are and what it is that has befallen you. My name, answered our visitor, is probably familiar to your ears. I am Alexander Holder, of the banking firm of Holder and Stevenson, of Threadneedle Street. The name was indeed well known to us as belonging to the senior partner in the second largest private banking concern in the City of London. What could have happened then to bring one of the foremost citizens of London to this most pitiable pass? We waited, all curiosity, until with another effort she braced herself to tell her story. I feel that time is of value, said she. That is why I hastened here when the police inspector suggested that I should secure your cooperation. I came to Baker Street by the Underground and hurried from there on foot, for the cabs go slowly through this snow. That is why I was so out of breath, for I am a woman who takes very little exercise. I feel better now, and I will put the facts before you as shortly and yet as clearly as I can. It is, of course, well known to you that in a successful banking business, as much depends upon our being able to find remunerative investments for our funds as upon our increasing our connection and the number of our depositors. One of our most lucrative means of laying out money is in the shape of loans, where the security is unimpeachable. We have done a good deal in this direction during the last few years, and there are many noble families to whom we have advanced large sums upon the security of their pictures, libraries, or plate. Yesterday morning I was seated in my office at the bank when a card was brought in to me by one of the clerks. I started when I saw the name, for it was that of none other than, well, perhaps even to you I had better say no more than that it was a name which is a household word all over the earth, one of the highest, noblest, most exalted names in England. I was overwhelmed by the honor and attempted, when she entered, to say so. But she plunged at once into business with the air of a woman who wishes to hurry quickly through a disagreeable task. Ms. Holder, said she, I have been informed that you are in the habit of advancing money. The firm does so when the security is good, I answered. It is absolutely essential to me, said she, that I should have £50,000 at once. I could, of course, borrow so trifling a sum 10 times over from my friends, but I much prefer to make it a matter of business and to carry out that business myself. In my position, you can readily understand that it is unwise to place oneself under obligations. For how long, may I ask, do you want this sum? I asked. Next Monday I have a large sum due to me, and I shall then most certainly repay what you advance, with whatever interest you think it right to charge. But it is very essential to me that the money should be paid at once. I should be happy to advance it without further parley from my own private purse, said I, were it not that the strain would be rather more than it could bear. If, on the other hand, I am to do it in the name of the firm, then in justice to my partner I must insist that, even in your case, every business-like precaution should be taken. I should much prefer to have it so, said she, raising up a square black morocco case which she had laid beside her chair. You have doubtless heard of the Beryl Coronet. One of the most precious public possessions of the empire, said I. Precisely. She opened the case, and there, embedded in soft, flesh-colored velvet, lay the magnificent piece of jewelry which she had named. There are 39 enormous barrels, said she, and the price of the gold chasing is incalculable. The lowest estimate would put the worth of the coronet at double the sum which I have asked. I am prepared to leave it with you as my security." I took the precious case into my hands and looked in some perplexity from it to my illustrious client. "You doubt its value?" she asked. "Not at all. I only doubt the propriety of my leaving it. You may set your mind at rest about that. I should not dream of doing so were it not absolutely certain that I should be able in 4 days to reclaim it. It is a pure matter of form. Is the security sufficient?" "Ample. You understand, Miss Holder, that I am giving you a strong proof of the confidence which I have in you, founded upon all that I have heard of you. I rely upon you not only to be discreet and to refrain from all gossip upon the matter, but above all, to preserve this coronet with every possible precaution, because I need not say that a great public scandal would be caused if any harm were to befall it. Any injury to it would be almost as serious as its complete loss, for there are no Beryls in the world to match these, and it would be impossible to replace them. I leave it with you, however, with every confidence, and I shall call for it in person on Monday morning." Seeing that my client was anxious to leave, I said no more, but, calling for my cashier, I ordered her to pay over £51,000 notes. When I was alone once more, however, with the precious case lying upon the table in front of me, I could not but think with some misgivings of the immense responsibility which it entailed upon me. There could be no doubt that, as it was a national possession, a horrible scandal would ensue if any misfortune should occur to it. I already regretted having ever consented to take charge of it. However, it was too late to alter the matter now, so I locked it up in my private safe and turned once more to my work. When evening came, I felt that it would be an imprudence to leave so precious a thing in the office behind me. Bankers' safes had been forced before now, and why should not mine be? If so, how terrible would be the position in which I should find myself. I determined, therefore, that for the next few days I would always carry the case backward and forward with me, so that it might never be really out of my reach. With this intention, I called a cab and drove out to my house at Streatham, carrying the jewel with me. I did not breathe freely until I had taken it upstairs and locked it in the bureau of my dressing room. And now a word as to my household, Ms. Holmes, for I wish you to thoroughly understand the situation. My bride and my page sleep out of the house and may be set aside altogether. I have 3 manservants who have been with me a number of years and whose absolute reliability is quite above suspicion. Another, Lucy Parr, the second waiting manservant, has only been in my service a few months. He came with an excellent character, however, and has always given me satisfaction. He is a very pretty boy and has attracted admirers who have occasionally hung about the place. That is the only drawback which we have found to him, but we believe him to be a thoroughly good boy in every way. So much for the servants. My family itself is so small that it will not take me long to describe it. I am a widow and have an only daughter, Arthur. She has been a disappointment to me, Ms. Holmes. A grievous disappointment. I have no doubt that I am myself to blame. People tell me that I have spoiled her. Very likely I have. When my dear husband died, I felt that she was all I had to love. I could not bear to see the smile fade even for a moment from her face. I have never denied her a wish. Perhaps it would have been better for both of us had I been sterner, but I meant it for the best. It was naturally my intention that she should succeed me in my business, but she was not of a business turn. She was wild, wayward, and to speak the truth, I could not trust her in the handling of large sums of money. When she was young, she became a member of an aristocratic club, and there, having charming manners, she was soon the intimate of a number of women with long purses and expensive habits. She learned to play heavily at cards and to squander money on the turf, until she had again and again to come to me and implore me to give her an advance upon her allowance, that she might settle her debts of honor. She tried more than once to break away from the dangerous company which she was keeping, but each time the influence of her friend, Madame George Burnwell, was enough to draw her back again. And indeed, I could not wonder that such a woman as Madame George Burnwell should gain an influence over her, for she has frequently brought her to my house, and I have found myself that I could hardly resist the fascination of her manner. She is older than Arthur, a woman of the world to her fingertips, one who had been everywhere, seen everything, a brilliant talker, and a woman of great personal beauty. Yet when I think of her in cold blood, far away from the glamour of her presence, I am convinced from her cynical speech and the look which I have caught in her eyes that she is one who should be deeply distrusted. So I think, and so too thinks my little Mary, who has a man's quick insight into character. And now there is only he to be described. He is my nephew. But when my sister died 5 years ago and left him alone in the world, I adopted him, and have looked upon him ever since as my son. He is a sunbeam in my house, sweet, loving, beautiful, a wonderful manager and housekeeper, yet as tender and quiet and gentle as a man could be. He is my right hand. I do not know what I could do without him. In only one matter has he ever gone against my wishes. Twice my girl has asked him to marry her, for she loves him devotedly, but each time he has refused her. I think that if anyone could have drawn her into the right path, it would have been he, and that her marriage might have changed her whole life. But now, alas, it is too late. Forever too late. Now, Ms. Holmes, you know the people who live under my roof, and I shall continue with my miserable story. When we were taking coffee in the drawing room that night after dinner, I told Arthur and Mary my experience, and of the precious treasure which we had under our roof, suppressing only the name of my client. Lucy Parr, who had brought in the coffee, had, I am sure, left the room, but I cannot swear that the door was closed. Mary and Arthur were much interested and wished to see the famous coronet, but I thought it better not to disturb it. "Where have you put it?" asked Arthur. "In my own bureau." "Well, I hope to goodness the house won't be burgled during the night," said she. "It is locked up," I answered. "Oh, any old key will fit that bureau. When I was a youngster, I have opened it myself with the key of the box-room cupboard." She often had a wild way of talking, so that I thought little of what she said. She followed me to my room, however, that night with a very grave face. "Look here, mother," said she with her eyes cast down. "Can you let me have £200? "No, I cannot," I answered sharply. "I have been far too generous with you in money matters." "You have been very kind," said she. "But I must have this money, or else I can never show my face inside the club again." "And a very good thing, too," I cried. "Yes, but you would not have me leave it a dishonored woman," said she. "I could not bear the disgrace. I must raise the money in some way, and if you will not let me have it, then I must try other means." I was very angry, for this was the third demand during the month. "You shall not have a farthing from me," I cried, on which she bowed and left the room without another word. When she was gone, I unlocked my bureau, made sure that my treasure was safe, and locked it again. Then I started to go round the house to see that all was secure, a duty which I usually leave to Mary, but which I thought it well to perform myself that night. As I came down the stairs, I saw Mary himself at the side window of the hall, which he closed and fastened as I approached. "Tell me, mother," said he, looking, I thought, a little disturbed. "Did you give Lucy, the manservant, leave to go out tonight?" "Certainly not. He came in just now by the back door. I have no doubt that he has only been to the side gate to see someone, but I think that it is hardly safe and should be stopped. You must speak to him in the morning, or I will if you prefer it. Are you sure that everything is fastened?" "Quite sure, mother." "Then good night." I kissed him and went up to my bedroom again, where I was soon asleep. I am endeavoring to tell you everything, Ms. Holmes, which may have any bearing upon the case, but I beg that you will question me upon any point which I do not make clear. On the contrary, your statement is singularly lucid. I come to a part of my story now in which I should wish to be particularly so. I am not a very heavy sleeper, and the anxiety in my mind tended, no doubt, to make me even less so than usual. About 2 in the morning, then, I was awakened by some sound in the house. It had ceased ere I was wide awake, but it had left an impression behind it, as though a window had gently closed somewhere. I lay listening with all my ears. Suddenly, to my horror, there was a distinct sound of footsteps moving softly in the next room. I slipped out of bed, all palpitating with fear, and peeped round the corner of my dressing-room door. "Arthur!" I screamed. "You villain! You thief! How dare you touch that coronet?" The gas was half up, as I had left it, and my unhappy girl, dressed only in her shirt and trousers, was standing beside the light, holding the coronet in her hands. She appeared to be wrenching at it, or bending it with all her strength. At my cry, she dropped it from her grasp and turned as pale as death. I snatched it up and examined it. One of the gold corners, with 3 of the barrels in it, was missing. "You blackguard!" I shouted, beside myself with rage. "You have destroyed it! You have dishonored me forever! Where are the jewels which you have stolen?" "Stolen!" she cried. "Yes, thief!" I roared, shaking her by the shoulder. "There are none missing. There cannot be any missing," said she. "There are 3 missing, and you know where they are. Must I call you a liar as well as a thief? Did I not see you trying to tear off another piece?" "You have called me names enough," said she. "I will not stand it any longer. I shall not say another word about this business, since you have chosen to insult me. I will leave your house in the morning and make my own way in the world." "You shall leave it in the hands of the police," I cried, half mad with grief and rage. "I shall have this matter probed to the bottom." "You shall learn nothing from me," said she with a passion such as I should not have thought was in her nature. "If you choose to call the police, let the police find what they can." By this time the whole house was astir, for I had raised my voice in my anger. Mary was the first to rush into my room, and at the sight of the coronet and of Arthur's face, he read the whole story, and with a scream fell down senseless on the ground. I sent the houseman for the police and put the investigation into their hands at once. When the inspector and a constable entered the house, Arthur, who had stood sullenly with her arms folded, asked me whether it was my intention to charge her with theft. I answered that it had ceased to be a private matter, but had become a public one, since the ruined coronet was national property. I was determined that the law should have its way in everything. "At least," said she, "you will not have me arrested at once. It would be to your advantage as well as mine if I might leave the house for 5 minutes. That you may get away, or perhaps that you may conceal what you have stolen," said I. And then, realizing the dreadful position in which I was placed. I implored her to remember that not only my honor, but that of one who was far greater than I was at stake, and that she threatened to raise a scandal which would convulse the nation. She might avert it all if she would but tell me what she had done with the 3 missing stones. "You may as well face the matter," said I. "You have been caught in the act, and no confession could make your guilt more heinous. If you but make such reparation as is in your power, by telling us where the barrels are, all shall be forgiven and forgotten." "Keep your forgiveness for those who ask for it," she answered, turning away from me with a sneer. I saw that she was too hardened for any words of mine to influence her. There was but one way for it. I called in the inspector and gave her into custody. A search was made at once not only of her person, but of her room and of every portion of the house where she could possibly have concealed the gems. But no trace of them could be found, nor would the wretched girl open her mouth for all our persuasions and our threats. This morning she was removed to a cell, and I, after going through all the police formalities, have hurried round to you to implore you to use your skill in unraveling the matter. The police have openly confessed that they can at present make nothing of it. You may go to any expense which you think necessary. I have already offered a reward of £1,000. My goddess, what shall I do? I have lost my honor, my gems, and my daughter in one night. Oh, what shall I do? She put a hand on either side of her head and rocked herself to and fro, droning to herself like a child whose grief has got beyond words. Sherlock Holmes sat silent for some few minutes, with her brows knitted and her eyes fixed upon the fire. "Do you receive much company?" she asked. "None save my partner with her family and an occasional friend of Arthur's. Madame George Burnwell has been several times lately. No one else, I think." "Do you go out much in society?" "Arthur does. Mary and I stay at home. We neither of us care for it." "That is unusual in a young boy." "He is of a quiet nature. Besides, he is not so very young. He is 24. This matter, from what you say, seems to have been a shock to him also." "Terrible. He is even more affected than I." "You have neither of you any doubt as to your daughter's guilt?" "How can we have when I saw her with my own eyes with the coronet in her hands?" "I hardly consider that a conclusive proof. Was the remainder of the coronet at all injured?" "Yes, it was twisted." "Do you not think, then, that she might have been trying to straighten it?" "Goddess bless you. You are doing what you can for her and for me. But it is too heavy a task. What was she doing there at all? If her purpose were innocent, why did she not say so?" "Precisely. And if it were guilty, why did she not invent a lie?" "Her silence appears to me to cut both ways. There are several singular points about the case. What did the police think of the noise which awoke you from your sleep?" "They considered that it might be caused by Arthur's closing her bedroom door." "A likely story. As if a woman bent on felony would slam her door so as to wake a household. What did they say, then, of the disappearance of these gems?" "They are still sounding the planking and probing the furniture in the hope of finding them." "Have they thought of looking outside the house?" "Yes, they have shown extraordinary energy. The whole garden has already been minutely examined." "Now, my dear madam," said Holmes, "is it not obvious to you now that this matter really strikes very much deeper than either you or the police were at first inclined to think? It appeared to you to be a simple case. To me it seems exceedingly complex. Consider what is involved by your theory. You suppose that your daughter came down from her bed, went, at great risk, to your dressing room, opened your bureau, took out your coronet, broke off by main force a small portion of it, went off to some other place, concealed 3 gems out of the 39, with such skill that nobody can find them, and then returned with the other 36 into the room in which she exposed herself to the greatest danger of being discovered. I ask you now, is such a theory tenable? But what other is there? Cried the banker with a gesture of despair. If her motives were innocent, why does she not explain them? It is our task to find that out, replied Holmes. So now, if you please, Ms. Holder, we will set off for Streatham together and devote an hour to glancing a little more closely into details. My friend insisted upon my accompanying them in their expedition, which I was eager enough to do, for my curiosity and sympathy were deeply stirred by the story to which we had listened. I confess that the guilt of the banker's daughter appeared to me to be as obvious as it did to her unhappy mother, but still I had such faith in Holmes's judgment that I felt that there must be some grounds for hope as long as she was dissatisfied with the accepted explanation. She hardly spoke a word the whole way out to the southern suburb, but sat with her chin upon her breast and her hat drawn over her eyes, sunk in the deepest thought. Our client appeared to have taken fresh heart at the little glimpse of hope which had been presented to her, and she even broke into a desultory chat with me over her business affairs. A short railway journey and a shorter walk brought us to Fairbank, the modest residence of the great financier. Fairbank was a good-sized square house of white stone, standing back a little from the road. A double carriage sweep, with a snow-clad lawn, stretched down in front to 2 large iron gates which closed the entrance. On the right side was a small wooden thicket, which led into a narrow path between 2 neat hedges stretching from the road to the kitchen door and forming the tradeswomen's entrance. On the left ran a lane which led to the stables and was not itself within the grounds at all, being a public, though little used, thoroughfare. Holmes left us standing at the door and walked slowly all round the house, across the front, down the tradeswomen's path, and so round by the garden behind into the stable lane. So long was she that Ms. Holder and I went into the dining room and waited by the fire until she should return. We were sitting there in silence when the door opened, and a young gentleman came in. He was rather above the middle height, slim, with dark hair and eyes, which seemed the darker against the absolute pallor of his skin. I do not think that I have ever seen such deadly paleness in a man's face. His lips, too, were bloodless, but his eyes were flushed with crying. As he swept silently into the room, he impressed me with a greater sense of grief than the banker had done in the morning, and it was the more striking in him, as he was evidently a man of strong character, with immense capacity for self-restraint. Disregarding my presence, he went straight to his aunt and passed his hand over her head with a sweet, manly caress. "You have given orders that Arthur should be liberated. Have you not, mother?" he asked. "No, no, my boy. The matter must be probed to the bottom." "But I am so sure that she is innocent. You know what man's instincts are. I know that she has done no harm and that you will be sorry for having acted so harshly." "Why is she silent then, if she is innocent?" "Who knows? Perhaps because she was so angry that you should suspect her." "How could I help suspecting her when I actually saw her with the coronet in her hand?" "Oh, but she had only picked it up to look at it. Oh, do take my word for it that she is innocent. Let the matter drop and say no more. It is so dreadful to think of our dear Arthur in prison. I shall never let it drop until the gems are found. Never, Mary. Your affection for Arthur blinds you as to the awful consequences to me. Far from hushing the thing up, I have brought a gentlewoman down from London to inquire more deeply into it." "This gentlewoman?" he asked, facing round to me. "No, her friend. She wished us to leave her alone. She is round in the stable lane now." "The stable lane?" He raised his dark eyebrows. "What can she hope to find there?" "Ah, this, I suppose, is she. I trust, madam, that you will succeed in proving what I feel sure is the truth, that my cousin Arthur is innocent of this crime." "I fully share your opinion, and I trust with you that we may prove it," returned Holmes, going back to the mat to knock the snow from her shoes. "I believe I have the honor of addressing unmarried Mr. Mary Holder. Might I ask you a question or two?" "Pray do, madam, if it may help to clear this horrible affair up." "You heard nothing yourself last night?" "Nothing, until my aunt here began to speak loudly. I heard that, and I came down." "You shut up the windows and doors the night before. Did you fasten all the windows?" "Yes." "Were they all fastened this morning?" "Yes." "You have a manservant who has a sweetheart. I think that you remarked to your aunt last night that he had been out to see her?" "Yes, and he was the boy who waited in the drawing room, and who may have heard aunt's remarks about the coronet." "I see. You infer that he may have gone out to tell his sweetheart, and that the two may have planned the robbery." "But what is the good of all these vague theories?" cried the banker impatiently, "when I have told you that I saw Arthur with the coronet in her hands." "Wait a little, Miss Holder. We must come back to that. About this boy, unmarried Mr. Holder. You saw him return by the kitchen door, I presume?" "Yes. When I went to see if the door was fastened for the night, I met him slipping in. I saw the woman, too, in the gloom." "Do you know her?" "Oh, yes. She is the greengrocer who brings our vegetables round. Her name is Frances Prosper." "She stood," said Holmes, "to the left of the door. That is to say, farther up the path than is necessary to reach the door?" "Yes, she did." "And she is a woman with a wooden leg?" Something like fear sprang up in the young gentleman's expressive black eyes. "Why, you are like a magician," said he. "How do you know that?" He smiled, but there was no answering smile in Holmes's thin, eager face. "I should be very glad now to go upstairs," said she. "I shall probably wish to go over the outside of the house again. Perhaps I had better take a look at the lower windows before I go up." She walked swiftly round from one to the other, pausing only at the large one which looked from the hall onto the stable lane. This she opened and made a very careful examination of the sill with her powerful magnifying lens. "Now we shall go upstairs," said she at last. The banker's dressing room was a plainly furnished little chamber, with a grey carpet, a large bureau, and a long mirror. Holmes went to the bureau first and looked hard at the lock. "Which key was used to open it?" she asked. "That which my daughter herself indicated, that of the cupboard of the lumber room." "Have you it here?" "That is it on the dressing table." Sherlock Holmes took it up and opened the bureau. "It is a noiseless lock," said she. "It is no wonder that it did not wake you. This case, I presume, contains the coronet. We must have a look at it." She opened the case, and taking out the diadem, she laid it upon the table. It was a magnificent specimen of the jeweler's art, and the 36 stones were the finest that I have ever seen. At one side of the coronet was a cracked edge, where a corner holding 3 gems had been torn away. "Now, Miss Holder," said Holmes, "here is the corner which corresponds to that which has been so unfortunately lost. Might I beg that you will break it off?" The banker recoiled in horror. "I should not dream of trying," said she. Then I will." Holmes suddenly bent her strength upon it, but without result. "I feel it give a little," said she. "But though I am exceptionally strong in the fingers, it would take me all my time to break it. An ordinary woman could not do it. Now what do you think would happen if I did break it, Miss Holder? There would be a noise like a pistol shot. Do you tell me that all this happened within a few yards of your bed, and that you heard nothing of it? I do not know what to think. It is all dark to me. But perhaps it may grow lighter as we go. What do you think, unmarried Mr. Holder?" I confess that I still share my aunt's perplexity. Your daughter had no shoes or slippers on when you saw her. She had nothing on save only her trousers and shirt. Thank you. We have certainly been favored with extraordinary luck during this inquiry, and it will be entirely our own fault if we do not succeed in clearing the matter up. With your permission, Ms. Holder, I shall now continue my investigations outside." She went alone, at her own request, for she explained that any unnecessary footmarks might make her task more difficult. For an hour or more she was at work, returning at last with her feet heavy with snow and her features as inscrutable as ever. "I think that I have seen now all that there is to see, Ms. Holder," said she. "I can serve you best by returning to my rooms." "But the gems, Miss Holmes, where are they?" "I cannot tell." The banker wrung her hands. "I shall never see them again," she cried. "And my daughter? You give me hopes?" "My opinion is in no way altered." "Then for goddess's sake, what was this dark business which was acted in my house last night? If you can call upon me at my Baker Street rooms tomorrow morning between 9 and 10, I shall be happy to do what I can to make it clearer. I understand that you give me carte blanche to act for you, provided only that I get back the gems, and that you place no limit on the sum I may draw. I would give my fortune to have them back." "Very good. I shall look into the matter between this and then. Goodbye. It is just possible that I may have to come over here again before evening." It was obvious to me that my companion's mind was now made up about the case, although what her conclusions were was more than I could even dimly imagine. Several times during our homeward journey I endeavored to sound her upon the point, but she always glided away to some other topic, until at last I gave it over in despair. It was not yet 3 when we found ourselves in our rooms once more. She hurried to her chamber and was down again in a few minutes, dressed as a common loafer. With her collar turned up, her shiny, seedy coat, her red cravat, and her worn boots, she was a perfect sample of the class. "I think that this should do," said she, glancing into the glass above the fireplace. "I only wish that you could come with me, Watson, but I fear that it won't do. I may be on the trail in this matter, or I may be following a will-o'-the-wisp, but I shall soon know which it is. I hope that I may be back in a few hours." She cut a slice of beef from the joint upon the sideboard, sandwiched it between 2 rounds of bread, and thrusting this rude meal into her pocket, she started off upon her expedition. I had just finished my tea when she returned, evidently in excellent spirits, swinging an old elastic-sided boot in her hand. She chucked it down into a corner and helped herself to a cup of tea. "I only looked in as I passed," said she. "I am going right on." "Where to?" "Oh, to the other side of the West End. It may be some time before I get back. Don't wait up for me in case I should be late." "How are you getting on?" "Oh, so. Nothing to complain of. I have been out to Streatham since I saw you last, but I did not call at the house. It is a very sweet little problem, and I would not have missed it for a good deal. However, I must not sit gossiping here, but must get these disreputable clothes off and return to my highly respectable self. I could see by her manner that she had stronger reasons for satisfaction than her words alone would imply. Her eyes twinkled, and there was even a touch of color upon her sallow cheeks. She hastened upstairs, and a few minutes later I heard the slam of the hall door, which told me that she was off once more upon her congenial hunt. I waited until midnight, but there was no sign of her return, so I retired to my room. It was no uncommon thing for her to be away for days and nights on end when she was hot upon a scent, so that her lateness caused me no surprise. I do not know at what hour she came in, but when I came down to breakfast in the morning, there she was with a cup of coffee in one hand and the paper in the other, as fresh and trim as possible. "You will excuse my beginning without you, Watson," said she, "but you remember that our client has rather an early appointment this morning." "Why, it is after 9 now," I answered. "I should not be surprised if that were she. I thought I heard a ring." It was, indeed, our friend the financier. I was shocked by the change which had come over her, for her face, which was naturally of a broad and massive mold, was now pinched and fallen in, while her hair seemed to me at least a shade whiter. She entered with a weariness and lethargy which was even more painful than her violence of the morning before, and she dropped heavily into the armchair which I pushed forward for her. "I do not know what I have done to be so severely tried," said she. "Only 2 days ago I was a happy and prosperous woman, without a care in the world. Now I am left to a lonely and dishonored age. One sorrow comes close upon the heels of another. My nephew Mary has deserted me." "Deserted you?" "Yes. His bed this morning had not been slept in. His room was empty, and a note for me lay upon the hall table. I had said to him last night, in sorrow and not in anger, that if he had married my girl, all might have been well with her. Perhaps it was thoughtless of me to say so. It is to that remark that he refers in this note. "My dearest aunt, I feel that I have brought trouble upon you, and that if I had acted differently, this terrible misfortune might never have occurred. I cannot, with this thought in my mind, ever again be happy under your roof, and I feel that I must leave you forever. Do not worry about my future, for that is provided for, and above all, do not search for me, for it will be fruitless labor and an ill service to me. In life or in death, I am ever your loving Mary." What could he mean by that note, Ms. Holmes? Do you think it points to suicide? No, nothing of the kind. It is perhaps the best possible solution. I trust, Ms. Holder, that you are nearing the end of your troubles. "Ha! You say so. You have heard something, Ms. Holmes. You have learned something. Where are the gems? You would not think £1,000 apiece an excessive sum for them? I would pay 10. That would be unnecessary. 3,000 will cover the matter, and there is a little reward, I fancy. Have you your checkbook? Here is a pen. Better make it out for £4,000. With a dazed face, the banker made out the required check. Holmes walked over to her desk, took out a little triangular piece of gold with 3 gems in it, and threw it down upon the table. With a shriek of joy, our client clutched it up. "You have it," she gasped. "I am saved! I am saved!" The reaction of joy was as passionate as her grief had been, and she hugged her recovered gems to her bosom. "There is one other thing you owe, Ms. Holder," said Sherlock Holmes rather sternly. "Oh!" She caught up a pen. "Name the sum, and I will pay it." "No, the debt is not to me. You owe a very humble apology to that noble lass, your daughter, who has carried herself in this matter as I should be proud to see my own daughter do should I ever chance to have one. Then it was not Arthur who took them? I told you yesterday, and I repeat today, that it was not. You are sure of it? Then let us hurry to her at once to let her know that the truth is known. She knows it already. When I had cleared it all up, I had an interview with her, and finding that she would not tell me the story, I told it to her, on which she had to confess that I was right, and to add the very few details which were not yet quite clear to me. Your news of this morning, however, may open her lips. For heaven's sake, tell me then, what is this extraordinary mystery? I will do so, and I will show you the steps by which I reached it. And let me say to you, first, that which it is hardest for me to say and for you to hear. There has been an understanding between Madame George Burnwell and your nephew Mary. They have now fled together. My Mary! Impossible. It is unfortunately more than possible. It is certain. Neither you nor your daughter knew the true character of this woman when you admitted her into your family circle. She is one of the most dangerous women in England, a ruined gambler, an absolutely desperate villain, a woman without heart or conscience. Your nephew knew nothing of such women. When she breathed her vows to him, as she had done to 100 before him, he flattered himself that he alone had touched her heart. The devil knows best what she said, but at least he became her tool and was in the habit of seeing her nearly every evening. I cannot, and I will not believe it, cried the banker with an ashen face. I will tell you then what occurred in your house last night. Your nephew, when you had, as he thought, gone to your room, slipped down and talked to his lover through the window which leads into the stable lane. Her footmarks had pressed right through the snow, so long had she stood there. He told her of the coronet. Her wicked lust for gold kindled at the news, and she bent him to her will. I have no doubt that he loved you, but there are men in whom the love of a lover extinguishes all other loves, and I think that he must have been one. He had hardly listened to her instructions when he saw you coming downstairs, on which he closed the window rapidly, and told you about one of the servants' escapade with his wooden-legged lover, which was all perfectly true. Your girl Arthur went to bed after her interview with you, but she slept badly on account of her uneasiness about her club debts. In the middle of the night, she heard a soft tread pass her door, so she rose and, looking out, was surprised to see her cousin walking very stealthily along the passage until he disappeared into your dressing room. Petrified with astonishment, the lass slipped on some clothes and waited there in the dark to see what would come of this strange affair. Presently he emerged from the room again, and in the light of the passage lamp, your daughter saw that he carried the precious coronet in his hands. He passed down the stairs, and she, thrilling with horror, ran along and slipped behind the curtain near your door, whence she could see what passed in the hall beneath. She saw him stealthily open the window, hand out the coronet to someone in the gloom, and then closing it once more. Hurry back to his room, passing quite close to where she stood, head behind the curtain. As long as he was on the scene, she could not take any action without a horrible exposure of the man whom she loved. But the instant that he was gone, she realized how crushing a misfortune this would be for you, and how all-important it was to set it right. She rushed down, just as she was, in her bare feet, opened the window, sprang out into the snow, and ran down the lane, where she could see a dark figure in the moonlight. Madame George Burnwell tried to get away, but Arthur caught her, and there was a struggle between them, your lass tugging at one side of the coronet, and her opponent at the other. In the scuffle, your daughter struck Madame George and cut her over the eye. Then something suddenly snapped, and your daughter, finding that she had the coronet in her hands, rushed back, closed the window, ascended to your room, and had just observed that the coronet had been twisted in the struggle and was endeavoring to straighten it when you appeared upon the scene. "Is it possible?" gasped the banker. You then roused her anger by calling her names at a moment when she felt that she had deserved your warmest thanks. She could not explain the true state of affairs without betraying one who certainly deserved little enough consideration at her hands. She took the more chivalrous view, however, and preserved his secret. "And that was why he shrieked and fainted when he saw the coronet," cried Ms. Holder. "Oh, my goddess, what a blind fool I have been, and her asking to be allowed to go out for 5 minutes. The dear lady wanted to see if the missing piece were at the scene of the struggle. How cruelly I have misjudged her." "When I arrived at the house," continued Holmes, "I at once went very carefully round it, to observe if there were any traces in the snow which might help me. I knew that none had fallen since the evening before, and also that there had been a strong frost to preserve impressions. I passed along the tradeswomen's path, but found it all trampled down and indistinguishable. Just beyond it, however, at the far side of the kitchen door, a man had stood and talked with a woman, whose round impressions on one side showed that she had a wooden leg. I could even tell that they had been disturbed, for the man had run back swiftly to the door, as was shown by the deep toe and light heel marks, while wooden leg had waited a little, and then had gone away. I thought at the time that this might be the manservant and his sweetheart, of whom you had already spoken to me, and inquiry showed it was so. I passed round the garden without seeing anything more than random tracks, which I took to be the police. But when I got into the stable lane, a very long and complex story was written in the snow in front of me. There was a double line of tracks of a booted woman, and a second double line which I saw with delight belonged to a woman with naked feet. I was at once convinced from what you had told me that the latter was your daughter. The first had walked both ways, but the other had run swiftly, and as her tread was marked in places over the depression of the boot, it was obvious that she had passed after the other. I followed them up and found they led to the hall window, where Boots had worn all the snow away while waiting. Then I walked to the other end, which was 100 yards or more down the lane. I saw where Boots had faced round, where the snow was cut up as though there had been a struggle, and finally, where a few drops of blood had fallen, to show me that I was not mistaken. Boots had then run down the lane, and another little smudge of blood showed that it was she who had been hurt. When she came to the high road at the other end, I found that the pavement had been cleared, so there was an end to that clue. On entering the house, however, I examined, as you remember, the sill and framework of the hall window with my lens, and I could at once see that someone had passed out. I could distinguish the outline of an instep, where the wet foot had been placed in coming in. I was then beginning to be able to form an opinion as to what had occurred. A woman had waited outside the window. Someone had brought the gems. The deed had been overseen by your daughter. She had pursued the thief, had struggled with her. They had each tugged at the coronet, their united strength causing injuries which neither alone could have effected. She had returned with the prize, but had left a fragment in the grasp of her opponent. So far I was clear. The question now was, who was the woman, and who was it brought her the coronet? It is an old maxim of mine that when you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Now, I knew that it was not you who had brought it down, so there only remained your nephew and the manservants. But if it were the manservants, why should your daughter allow herself to be accused in their place? There could be no possible reason. As she loved her cousin, however, there was an excellent explanation why she should retain his secret. The more so as the secret was a disgraceful one. When I remembered that you had seen him at that window, and how he had fainted on seeing the coronet again, my conjecture became a certainty. And who could it be who was his confederate? A lover, evidently, for who else could outweigh the love and gratitude which he must feel to you? I knew that you went out little, and that your circle of friends was a very limited one. But among them was Madame George Burnwell. I had heard of her before as being a woman of evil reputation among men. It must have been she who wore those boots and retained the missing gems. Even though she knew that Arthur had discovered her, she might still flatter herself that she was safe, for the lass could not say a word without compromising her own family. Well, your own good sense will suggest what measures I took next. I went in the shape of a loafer to Madame George's house, managed to pick up an acquaintance with her valet, learned that her mistress had cut her head the night before, and finally, at the expense of 6 shillings, made all sure by buying a pair of her cast-off shoes. With these I journeyed down to Streatham and saw that they exactly fitted the tracks. I saw an ill-dressed vagabond in the lane yesterday evening, said Miss Holder. Precisely. It was I. I found that I had my woman, so I came home and changed my clothes. It was a delicate part which I had to play then, for I saw that a prosecution must be avoided to avert scandal, and I knew that so astute a villain would see that our hands were tied in the matter. I went and saw her. At first, of course, she denied everything, but when I gave her every particular that had occurred, she tried to bluster and took down a life-preserver from the wall. I knew my woman, however, and I clapped a pistol to her head before she could strike. Then she became a little more reasonable. I told her that we would give her a price for the stones she held, £1,000 apiece. That brought out the first signs of grief that she had shown. "Why, dash it all," said she. "I've let them go at 600 for the 3. I soon managed to get the address of the receiver who had them, on promising her that there would be no prosecution. Off I set to her, and after much chaffering I got our stones at £1,000 apiece. Then I looked in upon your daughter, told her that all was right, and eventually got to my bed about 2 o'clock, after what I may call a really hard day's work. A day which has saved England from a great public scandal," said the banker, rising. "Madam, I cannot find words to thank you, but you shall not find me ungrateful for what you have done. Your skill has indeed exceeded all that I have heard of it. And now I must fly to my dear girl to apologize to her for the wrong which I have done her. As to what you tell me of poor Mary, it goes to my very heart. Not even your skill can inform me where he is now." "I think that we may safely say," returned Holmes, "that he is wherever Madame George Burnwell is. It is equally certain, too, that whatever his sins are, they will soon receive a more than sufficient punishment."
Thanks for watching this video. If you found this adapted version interesting, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves classic literature. I'd really like to hear your thoughts in the comments as well. Did this version feel any different than the original? And which book should I do next? Thanks again, and see you next time!